This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Amen.
Do you want to come? Okay, we're going this way. Well, I'm going to have to turn around in a second because I don't want the choir to hear part of what I'm going to say. I have a secret to share with you this morning. I need to come clean about something. We had a vote here at the church, and I didn't put my name on the ballot. I voted something, and I wrote in a vote, but I didn't put my name on it. So when our church was deciding to go from 2 services to 1, so we can have our special classes second service, they had asked for what time would work out best for you. And I didn't like any of the choices. So I wrote in my own time. I put noon. And everyone's laughing except my kids because they know that noon would work out best for me, for reals, on a Sunday morning to come to church. But you know what? I guess 200 other people didn't write in noon. So here we are in the wee early hours of the dawn at 9:15 a.m. And you know what? I'm making it work. Now, this is the part I don't want Luby and the choir to hear. We also did a vote thing about the robes. I think I was the only one who voted to wear robes every Sunday because I get tired of my 3 same skirts. But I didn't win that one either. But you know what? It's okay. I'm making it work. When I was a little kid, I had a tricycle just like that one, broken wheel and all. The back wheel of my tricycle fell off. Now, my dad to this day says that he was going to fix it until he looked out and saw me going down the sidewalk leaning to keep the metal part off the cement. And he said, I don't know how you did it. It was kind of sideways, but you just leaned over and went down, and I made it work. And I was telling my dear friend Cal Brame this story when he was 102 years old, and he chuckled and told me he had a story like that. His was about a bicycle given to him, and that was about in 1920-ish when he got his first bicycle. I don't know if his son Gene knows this story, but he told me it was way too tall for him. If you look at the picture, there's a bar going across the top, 2 straight ones going sideways there, and he couldn't reach the pedal. But you know what he did? He told me he was able to fit his leg through that triangle section to pump, but then he'd have to pull his leg back out really fast, so when the pedal came up, it didn't rub into his leg again. Until he grew into it. That's how he rode it. Did you know that story, Gene? You did. Yep, so you know what? He made it work, right? So, my last making it work story, not yet. The Skeens and the Kinches got to cash in on their big SSP auction item and have an experience over at Sycamore Canyon with us. And Mrs. Benny came over to lead the hike. I would have led the hike. I had to stay back and make a gourmet dinner, though, didn't I, for you guys? Yeah, so she did the hike. And when she came back, we had a gourmet supper and dessert. And then I wanted to teach the kids how to play Racco. And for Racco, we got out the game. You have 60 cards, and you need 4 trays that hold 10 cards. And dang it! Uh-oh. Am I allowed to say that, church? Oh. Dang it! We only had 3 trays. And I panicked. And Brandon Skeen said, excuse me, can I use that last hot dog bun? I told you it was a gourmet supper. Can I have that last hot dog bun? Let's take a look at this next photo. Mrs. Kinch sent this to me. That's our picnic table. And because I'm bossy and selfish and have the knife in my hands, I had to be the one to cut the slits. But I didn't cut enough. I only cut 9 apparently, but he got creative and grabbed a clothespin to make his tray. He made it work, didn't he? So why am I telling you all of these make it work stories? I think it can best be summed up in the Bible verse that Mrs. Kinch sent to me when she sent me that photo from the campsite. And it's from the book of Romans, chapter 12. It's verses 1 and 2. And it says, "Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And how do we renew our minds? We come to church in the wee early hours of the dawn, not wearing a choir robe. How about we say a prayer and go to Sunday school? Awesome God, we thank you for this wonderful church where we come to renew our minds and to grow in our faith and to be reminded that with you, we can make things work. It is with grateful hearts and in your many holy names that we pray and we say together, amen.
The reading for today is in 2 parts from Mark's Gospel. It is early in Jesus' ministry, and he's already getting into trouble with the religious authorities, even while he is rapidly becoming popular with the people. Here is the first scene from chapter 2. Once when Jesus and his disciples were traveling, they walked through a field of grain. They were hungry, so they began to pull grain from the stalks and eat it directly. But this was on the Sabbath, when no such work is to be done. There were Pharisees who saw this, and they confronted Jesus, saying, "Why are your disciples doing what our law forbids on the Sabbath?" Jesus turned and said to them, "Do you remember the story about what King David did when his followers were Let me try that again. Do you remember the story about what King David did with his followers when they were hungry and had nothing to eat? He went into the temple when Abiathar was the high priest and ate the bread that was consecrated to God. Now the law says that no one but the priest can eat the holy bread. But when David was hungry, he ate it and also shared it with those with him. For you see, the Sabbath was created for people. People were not created for the Sabbath. Likewise, the Son of Man is Lord over even the Sabbath." May we hear this ancient story with fresh ears today. Amen.
From Psalm 139, would you join with me in reading responsively? O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all of my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it altogether. You pursue me behind and before and lay your hand upon me. Whither shall I go from your spirit? Or whither shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, let only darkness cover me, and the light about me be night, amen. Gracious and everlasting God, for years, and not just years, but generations, for whole millennia, your people have turned to you in prayer. In the words of the psalm, we recognize our uncertainty and even our anxiety about how to approach you, that sometimes we would be apart from you, carrying what it seems only we should carry. And yet we know your presence is always in us and around us, that there is no place that we are apart from you. It is only our ignorance, only our brokenness that seems to put a barrier between us. We know it is not so. So help us to break down the uncertainty, take away our unknowing, and renew our faith so that we might experience fully your presence and your Spirit. And in this fullness, know your healing, know your strength, and recognize the hope that you hold before us every day. Then move in us to speak that hope, to show your light to those who are hungry, who are hurting, who are still holding the darkness around them. Help us be light in a dark world, even as you are light in our lives. We ask this in the name of the one whom you gave to us as the brightest light, a light that is from the beginning. For from the very beginning, when you first formed us, it was out of your great love for each and every one of us, across and beyond all time, in this great well of love, in this ocean of your compassion, we would swim each day and know our way to you. We ask it in the name of Christ, who taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Make it stay this way. Can't let this moment end. You set off a dream in me, getting louder now. Can't you hear it echoing? Take my hand, Lord, won't you walk with me? Because, Lord, without you, all the shine of 1,000 spotlights, all the stars we steal from the night sky will never be enough, never be enough. Towers of gold are still too little. These hands could hold the world, and it'll never be enough, never be enough for me. Never, 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 never for me, never, never enough, never enough, never enough for me, for me, for me. All the shine of 1,000 spotlights, all the stars we steal from the night sky, never be enough, never be enough. Towers of gold, you're still too little. These hands could hold the world, and it'll never be enough, never be enough for me. Never, 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 never for me, for me. Never enough, never enough, never, never, never enough for me, but you, oh Lord, for me.
In this scene, Jesus challenges the religious leadership of his time even more directly than before. This is from chapter 3. Another time, again on the Sabbath, Jesus went into the synagogue. There he saw a man with a withered hand. Pharisees were also there, and they watched him closely to see if he would cure this man out in the open on the Sabbath. If so, they would charge him with breaking the Sabbath law. Knowing they were watching, Jesus called to the man with the withered hand and said, "Come and stand up here where everyone can see you." Then he said, "Is it legal on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil? Is the Sabbath for helping people or leaving them helpless?" All were silent. Looking around them with anger, Jesus was deeply grieved by their hard-nosed religion. Finally he said, "So be it. Stretch out your hand." The man stretched forth his hand, and it was restored to the same as the other. The Pharisees left immediately to consult with Herod's followers about how they could collaborate to destroy him. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Amen. Principal reason that I have ended up in the ministry is because when I was in junior high and high school, the associate youth pastor lived down the street in the parsonage. And so I got to know him very well, enough so that on a regular basis I would house sit for him and take care of his dog and that sort of thing. And at that time, my heroes were the Marx Brothers. And I had a friend, I think I must have been a junior in high school. He was a senior, so I'm going to try and put some of the blame on him. It was his idea that while my pastor, Doug, was away on vacation and I was watching his house, since I had a key to the house, that we would go in and kind of rearrange things. So we started with simple things like, you know, in the kitchen, swapping all the pots for the plates and the plates for the pots, and moving stuff around in the drawers, that kind of thing. And then we went further. We got into the closets and swapped things around in the towels, and that sort of thing. And then my friend had a really great idea. Somehow or another, we got our hands on some Christmas sleigh bells, and we wired them to the box springs of their bed. We thought this was hilarious. And indeed it was. When they got home from their vacation, pretty quick they found it out. And since we already had a reputation, given our affection for the Marx Brothers, we were the goof-offs, you know. Doug called and he was kind of laughing, and he says, "Boy, that was a pretty good trick. That's pretty funny. Took us a while to find everything, put everything back together. Ha ha, ha ha. Very funny." Yeah, right. So that was great, you know. I mean, that's why we did it, to make a joke, have some fun. So a while later, I don't recall how much longer, but something or another, they were gone for maybe a day or a weekend or whatever it was. And we had, of course, thought of other things that we could have, should have done. Only at this point, I didn't have the key to the house. So, you know, this is suburban, rural Michigan. Somehow or another, we broke into the house. It couldn't have been too hard, because, you know, not like I'm that smart. But we got into the house and did some more rearranging. Well, when they came back, what we were sure would be so funny, because we'd done it before and it was funny, this time was not funny. We had crossed a line. So there was a come to Jesus meeting, or more accurately, a come to meet with the parents meeting in the living room of my house, with Doug, my pastor, sitting down and calling me into account for having essentially trespassed. And of course, it made a distinct impression upon me, since I'm telling you the story yet again 45 years later, that it is possible to cross the line sometimes. Possible to cross the line and hurt people you thought were going to be happy about it, you know, that a joke would be funny. I definitely crossed a line and learned my lesson. And just for footnote, Doug and I are still good friends. He remains my mentor, even as he's now retired and pushing into his late 70s. I'm sure that, Roseanne and Samantha thought they were going to be really funny with their remarks. But it crossed a line for many. Certainly enough so for Roseanne that they canceled her program. For Samantha, a lot of pushback there. I think there's some differences. If you want to talk about it, we'll talk about it in the news class, perhaps. Both of them crossed lines. A different line for different folks, but nonetheless crossed a line. This story this morning is about Jesus crossing a line with the Pharisees, and the blowback from that was not just a come to Jesus meeting. Let's see, how did that work? That wouldn't work. It wasn't come to Jesus. It was chase after Jesus. Because at the end of this story, and there's the two pieces go together. In the first instance, he and the disciples sort of unwittingly break the law by essentially harvesting wheat as they walk through the field and are hungry. But in the second one, Jesus walks right into the temple, and he's intending to make a point with the Pharisees about the lines they have drawn and how they should not be crossed. And at the end of it, once he does that, they're waiting for him. It says, and I looked it up to make sure, it's not just that they were going to get him or call him before the Roman authorities. The verb in the Greek is to destroy him. This is the early beginning of what will take him to the crucifixion. So today, I want to talk about lines and crossing them and maybe rethinking how we think about lines. So let's pray. Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations in our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O thou who art rock and redeemer. Amen. So lines, I'm going to be pretty simple, straightforward here, talking about the purpose of lines. Objective, subjective, negative, distorted, the lines of religion, the bottom line. And we're going to play with a real line along the way, assuming this doesn't pull over. I tested it the other day, but we'll see. Objectively, lines function to do what? Separate, also to guide. Certainly this was in the Jesus story where the disciples have harvested wheat and done work. The function was to give definition, to draw lines around. There shall be this one day of the week that is Sabbath, and you won't work. You're not supposed to work, even as God rested on the seventh day of creating the whole of the universe. So the line is drawn to guide our behavior, right? And it takes on explicit forms in a variety of ways. I mean, what are laws if not lines that say, literally, stay in this lane when you're driving and do these things if you want to exit? Lines and rules to help us work together and get things done. I would imagine on a production line, there are things you do and not do in order to produce what it is that you're trying to accomplish. When you're in the choir, we're not only using lines to find the notes, we're trying to be in line with the harmony and be together and in tune. That's a line that you can literally see on the soundboard on this new system, is how things are lining up. When we're mountain climbing, we certainly need lines. Did you see the news yesterday about the two guys who fell off El Capitan in Yosemite, died, didn't make it? And I'll bet it's because they were trying to free climb. They didn't have safety ropes for them. Lines help us live together. The rules and regulations, those things that guide us formally, are necessary for us to get things done and to not bump into and run over one another. But they also have a subjective function, don't they? They don't have to be formal. They don't have to be in print. They don't necessarily have to be visible for them to be lines that should not be crossed, like my breaking into my pastor's house. That wasn't in writing anywhere, but I crossed it. It was a line. How many other places do we have lines that mark the shift from what we don't know or need to know or should know about what we do and don't do? I probably, like some of you, I had the classic one. I remember it, in the checkout line with Mom. Maybe I was 4, I don't know. I took something off the counter, probably gum or candy, since she wouldn't let us have gum and candy. Took that off, and we got all the way through the line before she realized I was chowing down on whatever it was. Took me back, made me apologize to the cashier. That's how I learned where that line was. That's how I learned what was the appropriate behavior, right? Lines help us give something to aim for between our immature selves and our mature selves, our lower selves and our higher selves? Who is it we are trying to be? Those lines help us move towards that and know when we've accomplished something. What's next week, Commencement Sunday? If not, we're crossing that particular finish line, that marker of this phase of our life and our learning, degrees in hand. Now we're going to go into the next phase, and as we all know, even higher, harder lines as we try to become who we are to be. Invisible lines, visible lines. Informal lines, formal lines. I would guess you have your own stories to tell of when you learned and discovered lines that you didn't know existed, or lines that you crossed, maybe willfully, maybe naively. Every one of us has stories. That's how we learn, and that's how we grow. And we draw the lines objectively in order to take that collective learning and say, this is what is better for all of us. That is what the lines are supposed to be about, but then what happens? You know this. And when we draw lines, sometimes they trip us up. Or, Louie, why don't you come on over? Yeah, so, no, you can come right over here. Come right over here. It's all right. No, just leave that there. That's fine. It's doing good. Yeah. So we'll just have you stand right here. So, you know, we put lines on ourselves, we put lines on others, and say, you know, well, this here's one thing that you should do, or is the better thing to do, that would guide us towards becoming more completely who we're supposed to be. Then, of course, you know, the older you get, the more lines we run into, and we find out here's the ways our behaviors are supposed to function. It's all about becoming civilized, right? Becoming mature. And then whatever our job might be, we find there are other rules and things we're supposed to obey. And then maybe we get in relationships and we find out things that, you know, you want to do and not do if you want to stay in that relationship. Like, you know, don't use her toothbrush. I'll never forget that one. We use lines to shape and control ourselves, but then it also inevitably happens that we put them on others about what they should and should not do. Right? This is the dilemma for us right now on the trick. I'll let you go. Although you look handsome, I must say. Can you get out? Yeah, that's the trick. Thank you for illustrating my point. Then the trick becomes we draw lines and they become set in stone when they don't need to be. They become lines that aren't really about guiding and shaping ourselves or our behavior, but controlling others, separating others from one another. We're in the midst of a great drama right now that's continuing to play out for our Methodist Church as we struggle with what? The issue of what is the role and how do those who are of a different sexual orientation participate within the life of the congregations, within the life of our denominations. It's already shifting. Those lines have already moved in the broader culture, but we still have a lot of lines in place. A lot of lines that we've set that in theory, shape and control our behavior for the better, but now we're beginning to understand that no, they're tying us up from being who we truly are called to be. And that was Jesus' story. In both of these stories, that the rules that had been put in place, the lines that had been drawn, needed to grow, needed to be flexible, sometimes needed to be dropped entirely and understood differently, so that, how does he say it? What's the function of the Sabbath law? On the day of Sabbath, what should we be doing? Is it supposed to help people or leave them helpless? That's the dilemma. For us within religion, it's we see where it goes. I mean, again, at the end of this story, it says the Pharisees, the ones who have drawn the lines and written the rules, the ones who are enforcing the rules and tightening the lines, they are going to destroy this Jesus who's suggesting, you know, maybe those lines are not helpful. They are leaving people helpless. That was the whole focus of his ministry, was to open that up for us to see who we're supposed to be paying attention to, who we're supposed to be helping, and instead are being constrained, tightened, and excluded from the life of the temple worship, from economic viability within that culture. All of those translate directly to now. All those lines are there. Which is really ironic, given the meaning of the word religion. This is your one word for today that I hope we're going to all remember and go home with. Religion means, it's in two parts, so you can draw a hash mark between the R-E and legion. Re means to return, to go back, to renew. I mean, look up any word in the dictionary, and if it has R-E in front of it, it's about going back to some prior condition or state, doing something over or return to something previous. And the key in the meaning of the word religion is the second part, ligare, which means to bind or to fasten, to hold together. The way I always remember it is it's also the root for the word ligament. Remember, ligaments that hold our joints together. So religion is to return or renew a binding, a holding, a fastening together, specifically to reconnect to God and, by our theology, neighbor. The purpose of religion is to reconnect us with God and neighbor, which is my only frustration every time. There was just an article the other day, and I've copied it off because we're going to maybe talk about it in the news group, about our spiritual but not religious nuns, the great swath of especially younger folks who are not interested in traditional denominational religion, and for many good reasons, as this article describes. But every time that word religion is used in a pejorative way, as well, I'm spiritual but not religious. I don't want to be religious. I don't want to be associated with that religion, which is all about drawing lines when it's all about connecting, binding us together in the Spirit of God and neighbor. The lines are not supposed to constrain us from connecting with God and neighbor. That's the very meaning of religion, to bind ourselves anew to God and neighbor. So, of course, the problem with sermon writing, I got to tell you, is you can sit down to write. That doesn't mean you're going to stop thinking about it or that God isn't working on you. So midnight last night, all of a sudden it dawned on me, well, why does it have to be religion? Why do we have to return? Why do we have to go back and essentially do this over? Why does religion mean to reconnect? Because we disconnect, because we draw lines, because we put barriers between ourselves and one another, because we break that connection with God, forget who we are called to be. And then instead of drawing lines between ourselves and one another, we're supposed to be throwing lines out to one another, to holding one another, binding ourselves to one another, seeing ourselves as a part of that, what? Koinonia, that fellowship in the Spirit of God. And that's what Jesus burns with. The multiple translations on this, I had to dig into the Greek because there were so many versions of it, and this is the way it's rendered in its purest form. And looking about on them, as he's there in the synagogue, and looking about on them with indignation, together sorrowing. That's the Greek word doesn't have a direct equivalent other than perhaps commiserating. Looking at them with indignation and commiserating on the callousness of the heart of them. The callousness of the heart of them. That's when if you want to reclaim the old language of sin, that's the sin in our hearts. The callousness of not caring, of leaving people helpless when we're there to help, when that's the very call of who we are as a people of this religion, of being connected with God and holding to one another. So, bottom line. What's the bottom line? Bottom line, this comes from one of my other mentors, Ezra Earl. Bottom line for the church is not the traditional bottom line of financial viability, although we wish and hope for that. Don't let that take away from your pledging. However, the bottom line for us is the top line. If you'll help pass that around the back, we're going to do what we had done once before a while ago. Pull it around a little bit further. So we got it all the way there. Thank you. I think that'll be good. Yeah. So the bottom line is our top line, our value, the value we hold of connection, of not drawing lines between one another, but drawing lines to God and to one another so that it's inclusive. So that line which ordinarily separates us instead becomes a line of connection amongst all of us. That's the purpose of the line of who we are. Steve, you want to hold that? Just hold that. So what are we connected to? We're connected to a God who has thrown a line to us, connected with us through Christ, who comes present in our midst and invites us to take hands with one another. It doesn't surprise me that in this story, where Jesus is healing, what is the healing that he accomplishes? A man who has a withered hand, a desiccated hand. In the Greek it says dried up, he can't use it. And particularly in that culture, that means he can't work as he should. Probably contributes to his economic status being less than what it ought to be. And Jesus renews that and heals that so that he can take hands with the community that he is to be a part of. You're going to have to stand up now. You can see this coming, I know. And you're going to filter in towards the aisle and get a hand on this line. Some or all, or if you can't get all the way in, just hold somebody else's hand. You can do that. Hold somebody else's hand to be a part of that line. I'm not going to stress that little S hook too much, but we got a pretty good hold on this. So now indeed we are all connected. We're in line with one another. We're in line with God, connected with God. That's who we are. That's what Christ calls us to be. Connected with one another so that the lines that we're crossing are finally and ultimately, as always, that one, the vertical intersection with the horizontal, binding us together, creating the point at which we care for one another as God has cared for us in Christ. Thanks be to God who holds us together. And even if we have to redo it, continuously gives us the opportunity in grace to love one another. Thanks be to God. Amen. filled with faith. Go in peace.